There's no recovery from a bad first impression, both in dating and sales. Your sales reps need to sell better and smarter from the onset to ensure a good customer experience. That is why you should visit caliduscloud.com/Vengreso to view the webinar recording that will change your perspective on the selling experience and how you can improve. That's caliduscloud.com/Vengreso, caliduscloud.com/VENGRESO. And now on to this episode of Selling with Social.
And so when you think about selling, when you're leading with logic, it's not only something you shouldn't do. Man, you're polarizing your audience, and in a consensus sale, that's terrible. But when you're leading with emotion, you're binding people. So tell stories and be vulnerable.
Hey y'all, welcome to Selling with Social, the podcast that helps marketers increase marketing qualified leads, sales reps to shatter sales results, and sales leaders to grow as leaders. Each show, we interview sales, marketing, and social media practitioners, leaders, and influencers to help you connect, close more deals, build stronger relationships with clients, and improve your sales productivity. I'm Mario Martinez Jr. You're now listening to Selling with Social. Mr. Todd Caponi, I am super excited, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me today here on Selling with Social with some very big news. You've launched something very big, if I'm not mistaken. So do me a favor, my friend. Well, first off, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mario. Thanks for having me.
And congratulations on the launch of the new book. I believe it's called The Transparency Sale, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And for all the listeners here, it is so new that I personally have not received my copy yet, but hopefully I'll be getting that very shortly from Todd here in the mail. Is it in the mail yet?
If you've got 2-day shipping over Amazon, today would be the day that you'd be getting it.
All right. Fantastic, my friend. So do me a favor. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We obviously know that this is your first book. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. So that you're a book author and you had a publisher that was working with you. Do us, everybody, a little favor. We've got sales leaders, we've got marketing leaders, sales enablement folks, and business owners as well that listen into the Selling with Social podcast all around selling. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself. Who is the great Todd Caponi?
Well, thanks. First of all, I'm an absolute nerd for sales philosophy, which absolutely makes me a nerd. Just a thirst for buyer psychology and learning theory. But my career has always been in sales leadership and carrying a bag. Up until recently, I was the CRO of Chicago's fast-growing Power Reviews. And if you don't know them, and this is relevant in a little bit when we talk about the book, Power Reviews is in the business of helping retailers and brands collect and display ratings and reviews on their websites. So if you're on Crocs.com or Vineyard Vines and you're looking at a product, you scroll down, you look at the ratings and reviews. That's Power Reviews powering all of that. Before that, I was on the sales leadership team of ExactTarget through their IPO and their eventual $2.7 billion exit to Salesforce. And then I have been the VP of worldwide sales for a couple of startups before that. So the passion is for the buyer psychology, but really the expertise is around building the revenue capacity of SaaS technology companies.
So the question is are you still swimming in all the money from the ExactTarget sale?
No, that
you spent it all already on the book, right?
Yeah, gosh. I left my role as CRO of Power Reviews in April and took the summer to write. And it's funny that my wife just said this to me again today as I told her, I'm going to be on with Mario. I got the book launch. I'm speaking. There's all this going on. And she was like, man, you're working as hard as you ever have. And the only difference is you have no income. So I've had that issue. And so hopefully we're changing that now. But yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Just tell the wife, no fear. It'll all work itself out.
That's right. That's right.
On mine. No fear. We've invested a lot of money into Vengreso. No fear. It'll all work itself out. Don't worry. I got this, woman.
Thank you. Thank you. You're right. I'm going to actually bring her in here and have you tell her that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Say, have faith. Have faith. Can I get an amen to that, baby? We always ask this question of all of our guests. We want to know something about you that nobody would know by looking at your social profile. Give us something juicy, something good that nobody would know.
So part of this whole idea of writing a book is I've always been one of those guys that if somebody can do something, I should be able to do it. And that's how I felt about writing the book. But it's also led me down the path of learning just a whole pile of useless skills. One of which is I can ride a unicycle and I can juggle while riding a unicycle. And then one time in college for a talent contest, I juggled apples while riding the unicycle and ate the apples as we were going. So that's
pretty good.
I have some other weird skills like that. I can do some basic magic, but the unicycle is the thing that people look at me and they're like, no way. Yeah, I could bust that out.
Where did you learn how to ride the unicycle out? Or did you just like one day get on it and you just ride it?
Yeah, there was a guy down the hall in my dorm at Indiana University back in college that had one, and he could ride it. And I was like, if you can ride it, I should be able to figure this thing out. And I would just go up and down the hallway, holding the walls until I figured it out. We got another one, and we were out in the courtyard throwing a football around, riding the unicycle, and became experts at it.
Very cool. All right, so we've got a unicycle rider, a juggler, eating the apples while you're juggling, and a little bit of magic tricks.
There you go. Exactly.
So you must make for the funnest dad that ever shows up to any party.
My kids watch me unicycle like out in the driveway once in a while, and they've got the 9 and the 1 hit on the phone, and they're just waiting to hit that last one when I take a header, and they got to run me to the hospital.
Oh, man. Let's hope that doesn't happen. So you mentioned about the book, and super congratulations. Me personally, lots of folks have asked me about a book. And, you know, it was funny because, and this is no knock against any book writer whatsoever, and that's the reason why you're here on the podcast, because there's super value in writing books. But I remember when I first started out, and they said, you can't become a sales influencer unless you have a book. You need the book. You need the book. You can't get paid top dollars unless you have a book. The book will give you credibility. The book will. So as soon as someone told me you can't do something, of course, my natural inclination is, oh, let me show you otherwise. So I'll do video, I'll do podcasts, but I haven't done the book yet. And it's a necessary component I think I want to add to my repertoire, my resume, if you would, my tool bag. But it's certainly something that I don't envy anybody who does because of the amount of work that goes into it. So congratulations to you on the work that goes into that. Do me a favor. Why did you decide to write the transparency sale? Like, help me understand the history behind that.
Well, first of all, for anybody who wants to write a book, the first thing you do is you write a proposal. Whether or not you're going to self-publish or go out and take it to a publisher, it's an exercise that where you break down, who is my audience? Why are they going to care about this? What's the chapter structure? I mean, you go through this whole thing. The proposal took me weeks to put together. 3 years ago, I had an idea for a book, and I wrote a proposal. And when I got done with the proposal, I read it, and I was like, this sucks. No one's going to read this. And so as the CRO of Power Reviews, again, thinking about the world of e-commerce and retail and how people interact with reviews, we had done a study that showed that when you're looking at a product and you're looking at the reviews, the conversion rate of a purchase, so let's say you're looking at a pair of shoes on Crocs, the conversion rate on that product is highest when the review score is between a 4.2 and a 4.5. So a pair of shoes or a shirt or whatever will actually sell better when the review score is a 4.2 versus if it was a perfect 5. And so I thought about that and thought, you know, the e-commerce world is all about how do we enable buyers to come and go through a whole consideration purchase process on their own. What do we need to give them to make that as frictionless as possible? And it's imperfection. So I was thinking about like some sales training we just did. And I was like, gosh, we teach our sales reps to sell as though we're perfect. We're actually creating friction. So I started doing a little research. I've got a friend of mine at DePaul University here in Chicago who happens to be a neuroscientist, which is amazing. And I started talking to him about this, and he started looking at some books on neuroscience and realized that there's a reason why that happens, that the imperfection actually speeds sales cycles and increases win rates and makes it really hard for competitors to sell against you. And so I started really digging into that, and I was like, wait a second, this could be a book. So I wrote a proposal and started the research process to look at all right, how does this apply to prospecting, to positioning, to presenting, all the way to negotiating, and realize that embracing of your flaws and your imperfections and being vulnerable in sales cycles, it works. We started teaching the sales reps how to do it. And like I was going out and talking to clients, there was a big apparel retailer up in the Northeast that I ended up kind of one on their team selling to. And I started with why our competitors are better than us. And it melted the whole audience. And we got a deal done in 6 weeks that typically would have taken 6 months. So that's what led to it. I was like, I think there's something that could be really valuable for readers and salespeople. And gosh, it's like a bucket list for me. I always wanted to write a book. So it matched up. I wrote a proposal. I ran it by a few publishers. 3 of them wanted to do it. I chose one. And my whole summer was dedicated to the writing, the editing, the proofing, the endorsements. And here we are, a couple days into launch. I'm still alive, and it's been pretty awesome.
And I can prove that you're alive because I'm talking to you now.
That's right. I'm not an AI robot.
Yeah, exactly. So talk to me a little bit about the theme of the book. You called it the transparency sale.
Yeah.
I assume that's the theme here we're going with.
Exactly. It's really just about how salespeople should start to become thirsty for feedback around their products and services, and how to teach anybody who's in an influencing position. So if you're a salesperson, you're a sales leader, talking to your board or your executives, you're a recruiter, you're either a recruiting firm or you're an internal recruiter and you're trying to sell candidates. This whole power of embracing your vulnerabilities and leading with your flaws. But the trick is, because as I talk about this, you end up with people that are like, oh yeah, I'm honest with customers. But imagine a 23, 25-year-old salesperson and you're like, hey, embrace your flaws. And they go strolling into an account and they're like, hey, here's why we suck. That's not what I'm teaching people to do. There's a line there. There's how do you present yourself as though you're a 4.2 to a 4.5 and stop selling as though you're perfect? I give you all the pieces to that as we go through the whole sales cycle as to, when to leverage those things. So that's really the theme, something as counterintuitive as being transparent and vulnerable is really something that will never go out of style in sales.
So as an example, tell me if this is what you're talking about. Vengreso is a 1.5 year old company. And when I talk about Vengreso and who we are and how we've come to be, I talk about the history of bringing together, multiple companies and rolling them up under one organization, forming the largest digital sales training company. And, I was out there in the marketplace and there's all those disparate things. I, tell about the whole story to wrap people into the story. And then they say, how's everything going now? And it's like, we're a startup company, right? We're a 1.5 year old startup company and we have pains and struggle. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And so I start out with that particular thought process and they say, why is it the hardest thing you've ever done? I'm like, I've been in corporate my entire life, right? 18 years of corporate, managed $300 million a year in business for an organization, scaled organizations. And single-handedly, it's the hardest thing. Why? Because I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, and my hat's pulled off here and pulled off there. So that's what you become. Is that what you're talking about, like becoming vulnerable? Now, that's not becoming vulnerable for the products. It's more becoming vulnerable in terms of building a relationship with somebody where I'm doing it organically without probably thinking through the neuroscience behind this. I'm creating a story, I'm telling the story, and I'm actually building a relationship because it's all truth.
Absolutely. I mean, from a neuroscience perspective, we're wired to resist being sold to. And so anything that involves vulnerability and proves that honesty starts to lower that filter that we've got in our limbic system in the middle of our brain and makes every message hit home a lot closer when you start that way. Being vulnerable at the end of a sales cycle is not helpful. Being vulnerable, from that first conversation is doing exactly what you're talking about. It's breaking down the barriers, and then you can have honest conversations with people.
Yeah, fair. Now, I think that one of the challenges, though, is the way we teach salespeople today, or sales professionals, how we teach them and what we teach them and when we're teaching what to. I believe that there's some central problems behind the way we're teaching folks. And I think you address this through the book and talk about some of these things. You want to touch on a few items that you see are central problems to the way we're teaching sales professionals today?
Yeah, I think, number one is that whole concept of teaching sales reps to hide any flaws in the product. Like, let the customer figure that out somewhere down the line. One of the stories I talk about in the book is, if you've ever been to an IKEA, that when you go in, you're going to pick out the products yourself. You're going to go down to the warehouse, which is the basement, and you're going to load the thing onto a rickety cart. You're going to try to jam it into your car like Tetris style. You're going to get home, you're going to open this box, and it's going to be a freaking F-bomb laden nightmare to put the thing together. Yet you've got modern Scandinavian design furniture that you didn't pay a whole lot for. IKEA doesn't hide any of that, right? So I think there's a real opportunity for sales to work with sales enablement and with marketing to determine what that message needs to be around, hey, let's embrace the fact that we're not all things to all people, and lead with that so that we're qualifying deals a lot faster. So I think, number one is let's stop pretending we're perfect. The minute we get past that, we'll start seeing relationships build, faster sales cycles, better qualified opportunities, and we'll have more rope post-sale for when something inevitably goes wrong. I think number two is, and I could go on this one, just this whole concept of how logic polarizes us and how emotion binds us. Yet so many people understand the values of storytelling. But when I hear people pitch, and like I'm doing a little bit of consulting for a couple of companies, and I listen to how they teach their sales reps to present. And they're teaching their sales reps to present with logic, ROI, data. This is why we're better. We have this feature versus this. And we know, like, look at the political landscape. We know that logic polarizes people. When you think about cognitive biases, if you're doing a consensus sale and people are coming into a room with differing opinions on how things should be, and you lead with logic, you're actually solidifying their previously held positions. Interesting neuroscience study that was done that plugged what they call an fMRI machine into a whole group of people in a room, and then they told them stories and then played the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Mm-hmm. And what they found is all of their brains were flowing in unison. It was like all their brains were exactly the same for that period of time. And so when you think about selling, when you're leading with logic, it's not only something you shouldn't do. Man, you're polarizing your audience, and in a consensus sale, that's terrible. But when you're leading with emotion, you're binding people. So tell stories and be vulnerable. And then I think the third thing is one that I think plays in every stage of the sales cycle. And it's this whole concept of the fact that we are constantly in a state of decision-making. Like anybody who's watching this podcast right now is deciding every minute, every second, whether or not they want to continue to. There's just tons of subconscious decision-making happening. And I think we teach salespeople around this whole idea that there's one decision you're trying to get. You're trying to get them to buy from you. But man, every time you're interacting with that client, they're making a decision. They're either building trust with you or you're eroding trust with them. We've got to be thinking about that when we're prospecting, when we're positioning, when we're presenting, even the minute the deal gets signed. When we deliver T's and C's to a client, like, are we thinking about there's still decisions making happening every single step? And we need to be cognizant of how the human brain makes decisions and not just focus on whether they buy from us, but focus on every second that you're interacting with them. So those are the three things. I think there's an opportunity for us to teach reps to sell as though we're imperfect, to tell stories and lead with emotion, and to think about all the subconscious decision-making that happens throughout the sales cycle. That's right there for the taking, and it has tremendous benefits.
So I like what you said about number one, in terms of the things that we're teaching sales folks, central problems of how we're teaching sales folks today. And you articulated that some sales training programs are focused on how to hide the flaws and accentuate the good things, right? And you're suggesting that you stop hiding the flaws in the product. But I want to try to give you an example of that, of what we do. And I don't necessarily know if it's a flaw in the product, but it's a flaw in the methodology, right? So as you know, we're digital selling and we do digital sales training and consulting. And when someone says, hey, we want to bring you on board to come and train on LinkedIn for a day, the answer is no. No, why? What do you mean, no, why? Well, first off, I want to help you save your money, because you can't learn, quote unquote, LinkedIn in a day, right? You can learn product, you can learn features, you can learn how to click, but you can't learn skill set, right? So here's a question for you, Mr. Customer. Are you going to invest, as you know, salespeople learn with being able to watch it on their own, reinforce by doing, and then getting coaching on how to do what it is that they already forgot that they needed to do or that they were taught to do. So it's a 3-step process. So if we come in and you do a whole day's worth of training, are you actually willing to reinforce that with coaching? Are you actually willing to reinforce that with additional training? If you're not, save your money. Don't buy from us, and certainly don't buy from somebody else. That's one example. Another example is when someone says to us, well, you charge X dollars per person for training, but I can get this for a fraction of the cost. Well, no problem. If that's your budget, please go that route. But here's 2 central flaws. Most people who go out there, they're going to teach your people how to fish with prospecting, like prospecting using digital techniques. They'll teach your folks how to fish. But here's the central problem with teaching people how to fish. You haven't given them the right bait first, and you have to make sure they got the right pole. What's the bait? That's content. Do you even have the right content so that when someone goes out and casts their line into the water, that they're actually got the right bait to catch the fish that they're looking to catch? If nobody else is talking to you about that, we're going to tell you we're not the right fit. So don't work with us. And I would encourage you, if you're going to spend any amount of money, make sure that you have the right bait and make sure you've got the right fishing pole. Because here's the thing, you're going to teach people how to go and engage and where to fish and how to fish. But if they don't have the right pull, meaning their personal individual brand, if it says quota crushing sales rep on their digital profile and a buyer comes back to them, they're going to be just looked at as another Joe Schmo salesperson, right? Like, what value did they bring them? So you need to fix that problem first. And so I would encourage you, don't spend any money with anyone and just move on to something else from a sales training. Is that what you're talking about in terms of, like, it's not really a flaw, it's just a philosophy in the methodology, but we're articulating to somebody, don't work with us if you're not going to do these things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. When I think about flaws, one of the things I think about is, and I start this in the book, but my daughter, who's 7 years old, was sitting on the couch with her laptop, scrolling through iPad games. She wanted to download an iPad game. And then we were looking at Netflix, and within like 3 seconds, she picked an iPad game based on the review score, and then looked up at Netflix and picked a movie based on the review score. Part of the reason that I think we need to embrace this idea of starting with our flaws is not only because of the neuroscience, but man, we are surrounded by feedback. I call it the feedback economy, but our Uber drivers are rating us now. There's reviews on everything. You won't book a hotel without looking at the review score. You won't go to a new restaurant without going to Yelp. So it's becoming considerably easy for your buyers to find out why you suck. And so if you own that conversation right from day one, you not only build trust, and from a neuroscience perspective, all of those benefits are going to come from it. But if you're not leading with your flaws, you can bet that your buyers are going to go find it. And you want to control that. Because when they go find it on their own, that's where you end up with these stalled deals, or like, the client hasn't called me for 2 weeks. They went silent. I'm willing to bet that most of those are items where a buyer has gone out on their own and figured out that you're not the right fit. And so in this world where, the Challenger sale came as a result of there being so much information about our products and services, that it was time to start challenging, because they're already part of the way through the sales process. Now they know your feedback, and now they know where you suck and where you're good and where you're not. And so we need to start leading with that and owning it and being vulnerable. And I think it's going to help us focus in our territories and on our accounts better too, when we do exactly what you just said, which is we know where we're really good, and we know where buyers make mistakes when they're engaging in sales training, and we're not going to be a part of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I also liked what you said about that buyers are constantly in a state of decision-making. The way I interpreted what you were saying earlier was really think about, as you're going through the selling process, which is, for the buyer, it's the buying process, right? For the seller, it's the selling process. You need to be thinking about what decision throughout every step of the process are you leading a buyer to or through. For example, just because you get a buyer to connect with you on LinkedIn doesn't mean that they are going to enter into your funnel.
Right.
And that's what ends up happening is the moment that someone connects, you get all this crap that comes on a LinkedIn message or on an email message that pitches the buyer to trying to have a meeting.
Yes.
Right. And it's just like, no. You thought about this the wrong way, because you don't understand what the buyer is thinking, that I am willing to open up my network to you because I'm going to presume that you're not going to blast me with a pitch. Mm-hmm. But if you want to add value to some problem that I may have, then I might be more open to being able to gather some of those details. And I think if we think about this from a sales perspective, what is the state of the decision-making process that they're in? You don't go from hello to I'm ready to buy. Well, I mean, you might, but it's very rare that you would, especially in B2B sales, right? You don't go hello, that I'm ready to buy. It is hello, and then hello is going to lead to I'd like to have more information. What is that information? That's the decision point that you need to lead them to and figure out what that information is that they're looking for. And then after that, now it's I need more information. Now it's what else do they need to be able to move down the next step and the next step and the next step? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's the thing that popped into my head is like you meet a girl at a bar and you're like, marry me. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think about
it. Might happen, but I like it. I guess or something.
That's right. I think about it in terms of, for anybody listening that goes through their LinkedIn timeline or their Twitter timeline, how do you decide which ones you want to engage in? Like, when I go through my LinkedIn timeline, there's things that are just frontal. We're announcing this great new product that we've got that does this, this, and this. I'm like, scroll. And then like I come across yours where, you've got a video where you're giving a little 1-minute tip. And I'm like, I want to hear that. It's short, it's engaging, it's valuable, and it applies to what I'm doing. So, all right.
I'll pay you your $20 for saying that.
Thank you. And then, when you think about email, though, your email inbox, when you think about an executive, as an executive goes up in an organization, they get more reach outs, right? So as a CRO, I'm talking about this stuff, but I was getting 50, 100 reach outs every day, every couple of days, and they all look exactly the same. They all look like that LinkedIn post that is like, sell me, sell me, sell me. And then I get one that's like, hey, Todd, as a CRO, you might find this template for a board deck useful. And I was like, click on that. And I open it up and there's no sales pitch in this email. And it's just a link to a board deck. And I looked at the template. I was like, this is really helpful. What company is this? And then I went back and found what company it was. I think that as salespeople, we need to be thinking about those subconscious decision makings where, again, if our brain is wired to resist being influenced, why would your sales pitch email that, again, the one thing that I talk about in the book that I think is really important is it's no longer just about your subject line. Every, like if I look at my phone inbox, there's not only the subject line, there's the first 10 words of the email in it. And if it's I, we, I, why haven't you replied to my emails, Todd? Well, thanks for the reminder as to why I didn't reply to your emails in the first place. That's subconscious. I'm making subconscious decisions on every email I look at. And that's part of the decision-making process. So we need to start thinking about beyond the subject line, I think is really important. But to your point, every interaction's got to be providing personalized value. Otherwise, you're not going to get people to engage. And so don't be going on LinkedIn and connecting with somebody and then going and marry me. That's influence.
Even if it's not LinkedIn, you're finding someone's email and then, having diarrhea of email come at them with marry me, right? On email or a phone call even as well. I want to go into talking about, oftentimes I'm asked 3 things to stop doing that we as salespeople need to stop doing. We as sales leaders need to stop doing. This is interesting to get everybody's different perspective on this. And I know that you address some of these things in the book. Here's what I want to do though. What I want to do is I want to take a short break and everyone listen in to this message from our program sponsor. Do you feel like your sales team spends more time updating and completing administrative tasks than they do engaging with customers? CRM was supposed to automate the sales process, but instead created more manual processes. SAP Sales Cloud introduces modern CRM to the industry so that you can sell more and enable your team to be more efficient, effective, and intelligent. SAP Sales Cloud offers solutions to optimize your sales process, accelerate quotes and contracts, and enable corporate learning. No matter what industry you're in, you can build processes around what your salespeople do best. With SAP Sales Cloud, sales as you know it is about to change. Learn more by visiting calliduscloud.com/Vengreso today. That's CALLIDUS cloud.com/VENGRESO. All right. So I asked you about 3 things that you believe salespeople, or maybe even sales leaders, are doing today that we need to stop doing. Expand on that, because I know you touch on this in the book here.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I know we've talked about a few already about, how logic polarizes and we need to tell stories and like thinking beyond the subject line of email. But like I could go on all day with ideas for you. There's one really funny one that I think if you're a prospect, like let's say you're prospecting, that drives me crazy. And it's this whole concept of being in demand. So imagine for a second, you and a buddy are in a new town and you're deciding between 2 restaurants. One's on the left, one's on the right. The one on the left's got some people out in front of it. The one on the right is empty. Like, which one do you choose? Well, people want to gravitate towards the one on the left because it looks like it must be popular. People must like it. I always equate that to when I get an email and there's a little Calendly link in it, or HubSpot's got it where the executive can book their own meeting. And like I clicked on one recently and literally this guy's entire calendar was empty except for lunch every day. Yeah. And I was like, but that tells me it's the restaurant on the right. Like nobody's going to it. I think there's a real opportunity, and it helps from a psychological perspective, but that's a good one. I never thought about that. So
when you're talking about like a Calendly or a time trade or a HubSpot link, is have like start and stop times blocked out differently on the day so that nobody actually looks at it and says, oh my God, this sales rep is completely open every single day of the week.
Well, it's like your calendar, Mario. So, just booking this podcast, it's clear that you are in demand. You got a lot going on. And I'm like, oh man, I really want to do this. Like, which one's going to work? I got to move some things around. I'm excited about talking to you. And that's what you want your buyers to feel. And when you tell them, even if you don't have a calendar, if you tell them, hey, anytime next week's good, you just tell me. That's like if you were going to go get heart surgery and your doctor is like, hey, when do you want to come in? But you'd be like, man, you must suck. You want somebody who's like, oh gosh, I've got surgeries back to back. Like, that's good. So I think that's a really big one. There's a couple of other ones that have always driven me nuts about sales processes. That one being that, we get to the end of the sales cycle. Buyer says, I'm ready to buy. Salesperson's like, awesome. I'm going to send you a contract and I'm going to hook my lawyers up with your lawyers, and off they go. That starts the whole trust cycle over again, doesn't it? And you normally have a T's and C's agreement that has some little things hidden in it that you hope they don't find, that always get crossed out. I don't think the T's and C's process needs to be an erosion of trust and that salespeople should lose control of their sales process at the end. I think there's a real opportunity for us to work with our legal departments to create a cover sheet that talks about, that's super transparent in our legal processes and helps lawyers on the other end go, wow, I'm looking forward to working on this one because I don't have to worry that there's a bunch of stuff hidden in it. So that's something that I don't hear people talking about very often, but I know in my own experience at Power Reviews and Exact Target, man, the legal process was like, you're just like, oh, I hope this deal closes and I don't know when these lawyers are going to get through it. Well, don't lose control and don't forget about transparency and vulnerability just because the lawyers are involved. And like the last one is, I think post-sale, salespeople have got to stop selling a deal and then throwing it over to the wall and then moving on to the next one. Our best opportunities come from referrals, that experience that the customer has after they buy. Like that first 20 minutes after they sign an agreement, salesperson should be thanking them, sending them a letter about what's going to happen now. There's too many steps in a sales process where salespeople think that, the trust game is over. Be in demand. Don't think about the T's and C's process as being something you can't control. And post-sale, you've got to stay involved because that's where your referrals and your next job, that person that you just sold to is going to call you because they trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. The digital referral or the referral period is one of the most underused components of today's modern salesperson. It's all about, I hate to use the term, you're slam bam, right? You're in and you're out and you move on. Yes. And that's why I hate the concept of actually having a salesperson who turns everything over to a relationship manager and then there's another separate customer success team that's involved in the sales. Like you got to have some semblance of the person that, sold you the deal that you trust in that can help you through the process. Now I agree with that one. one of the things that you talk about, and I know this is something we talked about in our pregame show, if you would, was playing your cards face up.
Mm-hmm.
And this was an interesting topic. And this is particularly falls under the lines of, well, I want you to describe it, but I know you said specifically that this results in bigger deals. When you play your cards face up, it results in bigger deals. First off, what does it mean? And how do we actually apply this, play your cards face up?
Well, I'll tell you, this is specific to negotiating, where I had a deal that I was working on. And so my rep called me and was like, hey, we're at the goal line of it was a $1.5 million deal we were working on. Can you come down to Houston and help me negotiate this deal out? We're at the goal line, and they just want somebody who can make a decision. They don't want the car salesy, like, let me talk to my manager. So I fly down to Houston. I get in this room, and it's a big oil services company. So there's not one procurement person in the room. There's like 6, and they're ready to eat my lunch, right? And so I actually stumbled upon this whole concept of transparent negotiating. But I saw this, I knew where it was going. So I went up to the whiteboard, and I was like, hey, can I just write what the 4 things that we care about are? And we'll use that as a guide for this conversation. In a SaaS technology business, we care about how much you buy, how fast you pay, how long you commit, and when you sign. Those are all things that we're willing to pay you for in the form of a discount. And they're like, all right, well, we need 30% off. Like, all right, let's go through them. Can you commit to more? No, yes, all right, no. Can you pay faster? You're an oil services company. We noticed on your 10K that you got $15 billion sitting in cash. You might want to pay for the whole 3 years up front. We'll give you 5% for each year you accelerate. They're like, that's interesting. We can do that. Hey, you're committed to 2 years. Can you commit to 4? We'll give you an extra 10% off to do that. We'll pay you in the form of a discount. That's a phrase that I use a lot. And then, this was July in Houston, so it was beautiful.
Muggy, a little humid, a little.
It was a wet heat.
Yeah.
And so we were like, hey, if we can align on getting this done by the end of September, there's value in my ability to predict my business and to allocate resources. I'll pay you 5% to hold to the end of September. And so that's what this is all about. They asked for 30%. They ended up with 15%. And we ended up with a deal that we both felt really, really good about that sped through the negotiation cycle. And if they wanted to then go, hey, instead of 3 years, we want to commit to 2 years. It's like, all right, well, you're going to have to pay for that. And they know it. It's amazing how it works.
That's actually pretty brilliant, to be honest with you. I love what you did. Get up in front of the room and tell them what's important to you. And now we can work backwards to whatever it is that's important to them, right? So it becomes a win-win.
Yes. Yeah. So I've been teaching that for the last 7 or 8 years. And I was like, wait a second. I think that's what I would call transparent negotiating. And we ended up rolling that out at all of Exact Target. Exact Target used it with huge success. So every rep would wake up in the middle of the night. They could rattle off what our 4 levers were. Again, it was volume, timing of cash, length of commitment, and when you sign. And we were managing deals and having every conversation, not only in a new business sense, but even for our renewals. They were using the levers for all of those. And it's amazing how that works.
So let's go through that one more time. The volume.
Yes. Like how much you commit. So, if you're selling product, if you're selling services, it's how long you commit. How many resources do you need?
When you pay.
Right. The second one is timing of cash. So that could be, hey, we want to pay monthly. We want to pay annually. Or it could be even conversations around net 30 versus net 60. The third one is the length of commitment. So, some people go month to month, but I would argue that committing is a good thing. And if it's something that's important to you and your business, pay your customers in the form of a discount to commit longer.
And the fourth
one is the timing of the deal. So, I have a vested interest as a CRO or a sales leader. As a rep, I've got a vested interest in hitting my quota for the quarter. So there's value in me being able to predict my business. And so I'll pay you to hold to this date that we agree to get this deal done.
So in that regard, if you miss the timing, for example, if the date is October 31st, I'm just pulling that out, or whatever, then December 31st, coming up at the end of the quarter, how about that? We'll use that better. If you miss the date, then you lose the discount.
Yeah. However, here's the fun part of that. When you think about the neuroscience behind how the brain craves certainty, here's what you do. I want everybody to try this. December 26th rolls around and they're like, oh, you know what? Our signer is gone, is on a boat in Atlantis, of all places. I can't get DocuSign. He's not going to sign, but I promise he's going to sign on January 3rd. What do you do? My advice, because the brain craves certainty, is to do this. Say, let's talk about January in January. What I do know is that if you sign it this week, the discount holds. And then the buyer sometimes will go a little stir crazy. They're like, well, I got to know. Like, well, the minute that you say yes to pushing it out to January, your deal just pushed out to January.
Yeah.
The minute you say no, that the discount goes away, you've eroded trust. So say again, if you sign this in December, the discount holds, and that's what I know. And let's talk about January and January. Now, us using that technique has led to more people being found in Atlantis and on a boat and on a ship to Mars to sign a deal than you'd ever imagine. It's amazing the psychology of that. And so, I would argue that, come January, if they hadn't signed yet, well, what happens? Well, you might have a client that needs to go through a whole nother approval process. It might be worth your while to hold the discount and go to your next board meeting with that deal signed. So you might still want to give it to them. I wouldn't take a super hard line, but at the end of a month, create uncertainty around that, create certainty around, hey, I know that if we sign this deal this week, it'll get done.
I love it. So fantastic insights that you've shared here today. And the last tip that you just gave, I love that. And in fact, I'll be sharing that with our Chief Sales Officer, Mr. Kurt Shaver himself as well.
Nice.
But before we go, if people want to get in contact with you, Todd, they want to reach out to you, is that through LinkedIn, Twitter, email? What's the best way to website? You tell me, what's the best way?
On LinkedIn, but please put a note in there where you heard me. The blind ones kind of drive me nuts. So then like we talked about earlier.
If you're reaching out to Todd because you heard him on Selling with Social, say, I heard you on Selling with Social.
Exactly. But I've got, a website, transparencysale.com and toddcaponi.com. I'll go to the same place. You can sign up. I've got a little newsletter on there. And of course, you can buy the book. It's on Amazon, Barnes, anywhere you can find it.
And we'll put the link to the book inside the show notes for everybody who's listening. So you can come to the show notes and you'll see that as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Todd, I have one last question for you, my friend, and that is your all-time favorite movie. What is it?
I've seen the movie The Blues Brothers maybe 300 times.
Oh, wow.
It's always on, and my kids are young, but they love it. I got to put the earmuffs on when the swears happen. But it's Chicago, it's blues, it's hilarious, and there's something about the movie where you can pick it up at any time and just love it. I got a weird one, but it's not really weird. With Burt Reynolds passing this summer, growing up, my favorite movie was always Smokey and the Bandit. And so for whatever reason, I still love it. My kids love watching it with me.
Funny.
Yeah. But Blues Brothers is one that just kind of solidified. It was the first R-rated movie I'd ever seen. And I still love it today.
So it's got a special fondness in your heart because it was the first R-rated movie you ever saw.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, Todd, it's been great having you on the show here with Selling with Social, and I want to thank you for being with us. And for all of you listening in right now, do me a favor, take a listen in to this message right here. Thanks so much for joining me on that episode of Selling with Social. I hope you found as much value in that episode as I did. Here's what I want you to do next. Please go to www.vengreso.com. That's VENGRESO.com. VENGRESO.com. And make sure that you get access to our content. We've got the latest and greatest in digital sales, sales training, content marketing, and social selling strategies that are going to help you grow your sales pipeline. I look forward to having you on the next show of Selling with Social. Make sure you also go to vengreso.com/podcast to be able to get access to the latest and greatest Selling with Social episodes, along with any of the other episodes that we've got from Social Business Engines with my friend and partner, Bernie Borges. Thanks again for joining on Selling with Social. This podcast was brought to you by SAP Sales Cloud. Here's what I want you to do right now. Learn more about SAP Sales Cloud by visiting caliduscloud.com/Vengreso. That's CALLIDUSCLOUD.com/Vengreso. uscloud.com/VENGRESO.